Good afternoon and welcome to the May 10th, 2017 Legal and Finance meeting. And we will start out with roll call and determination of quorum. Here. Thank you. And now for the adoption of the agenda. We have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor? Aye. Now on to general public comment. This is the time for anyone in the audience to speak. We have no one, so I'll open it and I will close it. Unless we have somebody from the audience that wants to speak on items 1 through 10. So I will close it and we will go on to, do we have anyone that wants to remove anything from the consent items? 7 and 10. Item 7 and item 10. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Mr. Lorente.
Item number 8, please.
So far we have 7, 8, and 10. Anyone else? If not, I'll look for a motion to approve the rest of the consent items. Second. So we have a motion and a second to approve. Oh, Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The reason that I would like this to stay on consent is I would look forward to hearing about the, oh, never mind, it was pulled. I was going to say I'd look forward to hearing about the Mount Rushmore update on Monday night, but if we're going to hear it today,
10.
that'll be fine. Yep.
So we have a motion to approve the rest of the consent items except for 7, 8, and 10. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. On to item 7 through Community Resources. Approve FY 2016 Preliminary Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report. Mr. Wright, you have the floor.
Make a motion this be postponed to our next Legal and Finance Committee meeting, which I believe is May 31st, 2017.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Item number 8 from Community Planning and Development. Approve Resolution 2017-019, a resolution approving revision number 2, project plan reallocating project costs for tax increment District 54 for property generally described as being located north of Mall Drive and west of Haynes Avenue. Mr. Lorente, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And if I could have one of the applicants up here, please, if they're here.
They are.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to introduce myself, Catherine Johnson, who along with my husband Doyle Estes are the members of DTH LLC, who's the developer.
Ms. Johnson, on this particular one, I just want to make sure that I understand. We had this is the second request for a reallocation. Can you explain to me what the first reallocation in 2008 was for?
Yes, that reallocation was to the decision. There's two major parts to that. The decision was made that rather than putting in a well, there would be a water reservoir constructed up on the hill. So it shifted the funds that were designated for the well to the reservoir, in addition to which the original 2005 project plan did not have any fees in there for professional services. And so they just took, I believe it was a 10%. They shifted 10% of the funds for each one of the construction projects into professional services.
So there was an allocation in the TIF for professional funds.
Yeah, I believe it was just a standard, just a 10% where they took that of the construction over to professional services.
Were there actually professional services expenses? I mean, if it was 10% built in, are you saying there was professional services or there was not in the first TIF application?
Well, in 2005, the professional services weren't broken out as a line item.
Okay.
In 2005, and then 2008, funds were shifted from the construction into that category so that there was a line item created.
So that 10% that was built in, was that high or low on the original application to the actual? Can you recall?
Well, the only work that had been done that involved professional services when the first reallocation was done in 2008, was for the extension of the water main south along Bunker. And I believe that, I'd have to check, I can check here for sure, but I think that the actual professional services exceeded slightly the amount that was put in there in 2008, yes. It was 15,000 in 2008, and the actual turned out to be 30,608.
So now let's move forward now this reallocation is being done for what purpose that you're requesting now?
To line up to match the actual costs for not only professional services, but for construction, for all the line items to match the actual costs, to change the project plan so that it matches the actual costs.
So professional services originally were around a little over 10% from your explanation. From my understanding, looking at this application, we're looking at a professional service costs of upwards of 30% and a little over that. Can you explain the difference?
Well, yes. The actual professional services as a percentage of the actual construction costs, right now, if you exclude the work that was done in Phase 1, which was the extension of the water main in south on Bunker, if you exclude that, if you just exclude the Northridge, if you just take the Northridge water infrastructure, which includes the booster station, the water main, the grading up to the reservoir, if you take that as a package, the professional services were right around 29% of the actual construction costs, if you put those all together. There were several drivers that added to the professional service costs, but I would say that the primary driver was there was this realignment of the water line and the associated grade of the road. And and our engineer, Hanny Shaffey with Dream Design, he can be probably a little more detailed than me, but in a nutshell, that alignment was changed multiple times, but primarily 2 or 3 times.
Okay.
So it added a lot of costs, put it that way.
Let me interrupt you. I'm sorry, but I don't have a lot of time left. But my last question to you is, on this particular TIF, however, you finalized all of your TIF costs in 2012. So if you're finalizing all your costs in 2012, why are we here?
Well, we really didn't finalize the costs. That was not, and I know that there was some misunderstanding about this, but we always knew that we had to prepare a revised project plan to ensure that the project plan met the actuals. I mean, we always knew we had to do that. So we didn't view the 2012 certification as a final certification. And part of the reason that we knew we had to do that later is because the last invoice we received was in 2014. So we knew there was some outstanding costs that we didn't have access to, we didn't know about, we didn't know the precise amount in 2012. So it was never our intention that that was the final cost certification.
But you did certify all of your TIF costs in 2012.
No.
That is my understanding.
No, we didn't even get the last invoice related to this until 2014.
I'm not going to hold you to a clock.
Right.
Go ahead and ask as many questions
I'd like
you
to
want.
ask the finance officer a question on this, because I want to understand the difference between what I understand as being a certification of all of the TIF costs in 2012 compared to what the applicant is saying now. Pauline, can you rectify the difference here? I mean, do you have, if you can rectify that for me, because I don't understand.
Okay, so I think where the confusion on this is you're saying costs, where I've said I show all of the project plan line items had been certified at some level. I didn't, if there are extra costs in 2012, I was not aware of any of those. Nothing was said to me about there being additional costs or that an amendment was going to be coming forward at any point in time. So my comments refer to the project line items within the project plan, where all of those have been certified to some extent.
Okay, so when did you learn, your office learn, after 2012, when costs were certified, that this indeed wasn't this wasn't indeed the certification of all of the costs? Because she's saying they knew at the time in 2012 that that wasn't going to be all of the costs. So do you have any idea when your office learned that what they certified in 2012 wasn't everything?
From looking at some files, some spreadsheets in my, on my desktop, it looks like I found out in December of 2016 when I had a binder placed on my desk. They had stopped by to drop it off.
So is in a particular TIF, is it normal or abnormal to certify all your costs and then 4 years later come back and say, we're not done? Is that normal?
I will say that I don't believe I've ever run into it before.
Okay, thank you. I yield.
Alderwoman Modrick, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask Pauline, okay, so you stated that you received in 2016, which was just last year, you said there was a certification that you also found, so what was the date of that certified document?
Are you talking the additional costs?
Right, because you said you were still active with this project in 2016?
Well, it was in 2016 when I got notified that there were additional costs that they wanted to certify. And so when that binder was in my inbox, I had emailed Kathy and told her that I was confused because it said final certification on it. And I said I showed that everything was certified in 2012. And so she emailed back saying that she apologized for that and that she would go through the process of requesting an amendment before I would look at any of the additional certified costs.
So then did you receive the 2014 invoice, which was?
That was actually the city's invoice to them because of the agreement that we had based on some of the projects within the project plan. So that was an invoice from the city to them that one of the projects went over what was originally budgeted.
So then at any point then, because we have a lot of links, which is great for information, but at any point then, would the reallocation that went from 2005 to the additional 2008 with the well to reservoir, the reallocating is with booster stations, water mains, 29% of the cost that was brought on to the development process because of the change to the reservoir, which was a necessity. We needed to have that there. Do you see then that the 29% cost is an adjustable item that should be reallocated in this project so that we can move forward and close it?
Are you talking, what are you talking 29%? I'm sorry.
When Kathy had spoken about there was additional cost with the booster station, the water main, the reservoir, because they did not have that in 2005, but then placed that in for reallocation in 2008 because the project changed.
Correct.
Twice, I believe you said.
Yeah. Well, and then in the agreement, when the project changed, it was built into the agreement that Doyle would give the money to the city upfront based on estimates at the time. I believe it was $675 for one of the projects and $540 for another. And then after it was all said and done, the project was completed. There was an overage, and so then we billed them for, it was like $84,000. Yes.
Okay. So really, the only thing that we are sitting on for anything that's outstanding is the reallocation, because in 2005, at that time, obviously, there were no fees for services in a line item, but now we're getting documents where it's breaking it down even farther so that we have a better understanding of our reallocation. Is it still in the same project?
They're the same projects, it's just getting reallocated. Some of it's coming from the interest line item up to the capital projects or the professional service line items.
And our interest was over $1 million, I believe we received from the project. And if it's okay, if you want to look and you can correct, I want to continue my time if I could, Chair. So now maybe Kathy can answer that, but I know we also have Patsy, so I'd like to maybe bring Patsy up, who might be able to clarify if you don't mind, Kathy,
Yeah,
and
well,
then we
please.
can work off the question. Thank you. Thank you, Patsy. Can you bring us more information?
I can, and I can show you a couple slides if you want. maybe. So this is actually the reallocation spreadsheet that identifies the 2005 estimated construction costs, including professional services. This is the reallocation that was done in 2008 that identified the professional fees. You can see the certification in the next column, the first certification for the first phase in 2008. There was some interest that was accrued. And then this column, this is the certification that you were talking about in 2012. And so the very last two columns are really what they're trying to certify now, to identify, how much they actually expended for these various items in the project plan. And I believe the question was related to interest. And so these are the three amortization schedules. First one shows phase one. So we spent $140,000 on the first certification in interest. The second one we spent not quite $800,000, and we anticipate that being that second phase of certification to be paid off December 2018. And then this is the proposal based on the existing actual expenditures within this TIF, and so we would anticipate another 1.1 million in interest, which is far below the 2.3 that would be allowed based on the original project plan. I think that might answer your question.
If I could, Chair, I'll yield over for other questions that the council may have and maybe come back in if I need to. Thank you.
And I do want to let the committee know to ignore the clock. I don't run the clock on this meeting. You can speak as many times as you want for as long as you want. Go ahead, Mr. Wright.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I understand, maybe Kathy or Patsy can handle this. As I read the memo of May 5th, both from Catherine and Doyle, the costs in the professional services were caused by repeated redesign and change in design for infrastructure that's owned by the city. Is that correct?
Correct. And one of the things that occurs after this reallocation is done is staff from finance, planning, and public works goes through every invoice that they submitted. We compare it with the applications that were submitted, the requests during, all of the different designs and redesigns to ensure that, what they've actually requested as an expenditure meets the intent of the project plans inside the TIF district, and it's an actual expenditure that would be allowed based on, what was approved. So this is really the first step in getting this completed and certified and paid off.
So one more question to you, Patsy. I support the cost increases due to the redesign based on the letter and what I understand of the project. But everything is in line with the TIF, we're not increasing the costs, it's just being redistributed because of the additional costs, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you, I support it, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wright, and our City Attorney, Joel Landine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to talk generally. One of the frustrating things for staff, when this was submitted in 2012, the finance officer had understood that this was not the final cost of the project, it wouldn't have been certified and they wouldn't have started receiving payment on it. The idea, when you get certified, the way we have always done TIFs is before you can get payment, you have to certify the cost, and then we start making payments. Now, some of you may be aware in some projects where it's going to be longer or it's more involved, we may break it up into phases and allow you to certify by phase. So if you have a street and then you have some other improvement, maybe we'll say phase one is the street, and when you complete all the construction and design and have all the final costs on the street, you can certify that even though another component of the TIF has not been completed. So again, in 2012, if Pauline had not understood that the project was completed, she would not have certified it and started making payments on it. So that was unclear. The other frustration for staff is when you have a situation where you're talking in many cases tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, this project started what, in 2005 or whatever. We're talking 12 years or more, and we're still trying to get our ducks in a row and get things paid when, you know, it's just baffling to me when you're a developer and you have tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, on the hook, that you're not able to get things together quicker and in a more timely manner to get your reimbursement. So now we're going back and trying to look at invoices from 5 years ago or more or whatever, and it makes it really difficult when you certify, which is one of the reasons now we give people specific amounts of time to certify and get their costs in and get it done, because frankly, we've had too many developers that wait too long to start submitting invoices and always come back later or say, we have this other thing that needs to be reimbursed. Putting some more onus on them to get things done, figure out what they're expending, and get it into the city for reimbursement in a timely manner. That definitely did not happen in this case. Again, it's mostly falls on Pauline, but it is extremely frustrating and makes it much more difficult for staff when we have certifications that are run like this. So again, if they didn't understand that it was, and Mr. Estes, this isn't his first TIF, I think he understood that, and we've done phases with him before so he could get reimbursed on things that were already completed. So if they knew, I think that if they didn't call it a certification in 2012, they weren't going to start getting reimbursed. So it troubles me that if they knew they had additional costs, why they would have certified it in 2012. I can certainly understand why he would want to start receiving payment on this, but I think it's kind of ridiculous that it's taken 5 years to then get from that to where we have a final certification of costs.
Alderwoman Scott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Patsy, may I ask you a few questions?
Sure.
I know TID certification can be very, very complex, and I think I learn something new every single time we talk about TID districts and TIFs and everything else. But my concern is, and it has been over about the last 18 months on these, is looking at when a developer comes back and wants to appropriate finance interest into some of the capital costs. So I'm going to start with some basic questions since I have lenience. So when the TIF committee reviews this and is brought forward, and you do an excellent job trying to bring in all the information, and then part of what the applicant can ask for, which is allowed, is finance interest on these costs that the developer has to carry. But the finance interest is calculated over a certain period of time for this to pay off by the incremental taxes that are collected due to the economic growth in the area. Correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. So when the TID is approved, goes through the TIF committee, goes through city council, planning commission, everybody has a chance to review this. From the taxpayer's point of view, and I'm looking from the taxpayer because there's 3 districts involved here, the county, the school, and the city. They're setting aside the collection of these incremental taxes for this project to get paid on the economic growth that the project is spurring. Do I have that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So for the county and the city and the school district to set aside these funds, what's included in the TIF is this finance charge, and the anticipation is that the more economic growth that happens, the more incremental taxes are collected, that we don't have to pay the full finance interest.
Correct.
Am I thinking through this correctly? So when we approve that, saying, well, based on our current, economic growth, what we think is going to go out there over the next, 10, 15, 20 years, we think you're going to have an interest of this, and we'll include that in the project if it takes you that long to get paid back because you're carrying the cost of that financing. Correct?
Correct.
So then when the growth, thank goodness, comes in faster, in my mind, that should be a negative on that finance, because then we shouldn't be paying that extra finance on it. Correct?
That would be my assumption as well.
So Thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was thinking about this correctly, because the finance charges that are offered, or, that you're specifying in this incremental, it looks like there's supposed to be a deduct, and so we're being asked to approve taking taxpayers' money from the school, the city, and the county that could be paid back to them sooner, and actually allocating it to other costs that occurred within the project. I don't have an issue reallocating costs to line everything up on the items that as specified, such as the example on this one is moving the actual $675,000 from the water reservoir up to the well. That one makes sense to me because that's a realignment of the actual project. As I learn more about this financing and the interest on these things, I'm really having a hard time, and I'd have to see really clear as far as what makes sense to me to give up those dollars that would go back to the county, the city, and the school district to cover finance charges that we're not anticipating have to be paid. So,
May I add one thing to that? May I?
Let me go to Mr. Wright first.
Okay.
Thank you. I have a question. I understand there was a bill from the city in 2014. What was that for, and how much was it?
It
And
was
when was it?
$85,000, and it was in conjunction with the,
I'll tell you what my understanding is. Part of the agreement with the developer was that this was for the booster station itself now, that that was a city bid project, but that the city would negotiate construction management with an engineering firm, and that the TIF would pay for that, would pay for those services. And this project was bid in 2010, September, I believe, and it was then constructed over the next few months. The project, or the construction management, bidding and construction management fees, then we received an invoice from the city for that amount, and it turned out it was 84 and change thousand. And we got that invoice in 2014.
Okay, thank you.
Alderwoman Modrick, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Kathy, did you get your piece that you wanted to address out there?
No, I'd just like to add one additional piece of information regarding Councilwoman Scott's question. On this TIF, as well as, I've only worked on two, but the primary reason why finance costs aren't as much as projected really isn't because of how the development came in and the stream of tax increment money, as it is a change in interest rates. When the recession came in 2008 and 9 and 10, the interest rates dropped dramatically, and we refinanced those loans several times to take advantage of those lower interest rates. So that is the primary driver of the less amount in interest being paid over time than it is the rate of growth for the incremental taxes coming in.
Mr. Chair, may I ask Joel a question? You may. Thank you. Joel, so when you mentioned that part of the frustration for staff is the submission to certify, and then you said that these need to be done in a time limit. What is the legal time limit on these TIDs and TIFs?
It's really driven by the agreement, but situations like this are why now there's actually time limits included in all our new agreements, because this frankly became far too common a practice. But again, if we were aware this was not a final cost, we would not have probably certified it in 2012, or we would have required Mr. Estes to come to the council and get authorization to start paying on it at that time.
So can I ask then, because they didn't get a final bill from the city until 2014, while meantime there's certification that had happened 2 years prior, then shouldn't the city had submitted also in a timely fashion, just to clarify what that timely fashion or time limit is when you're going after certification? And it sounds like in 2005 we didn't have that in an agreement, or 2008, but we do now. So just to reflect back and bring us forward on that.
So is the amount that the city invoiced, is that reimbursable out of the TIF, Or was that reimbursable out of the TIF originally?
If the city incurred the cost prior to that not incur the cost, had it under contract prior to the 5-year time limit, we've always said that it is eligible to be reimbursed. As far as the city doing it, I don't know when the project was completed. When we received the information from Public Works to build them, we did.
So I mean, was that a reimbursable under the original TIF? Was that even a reimbursable cost?
That's something that we're still looking into. We had that discussion Monday that we needed to make sure that it was. We think that the contract was under contract in 2010, which would have been within that 5-year limit. We just need to make sure.
But was it identified in the costs?
Not originally, no. What was originally included in the project plan was what we set aside already for those projects, which it was either the 550 or 540 or the 675 or 750 or whatever the second one was.
So the reason is because that was not, it sounds like to me, an originally contemplated cost under the originally approved plan. Now they're trying to get it reimbursed, it sounds like, through the tax increment district. So that is why it did not come, city didn't know that was out there for certification when it was certified.
That's not right.
And so it wasn't a city invoice. Well, it actually was a city invoice.
It
The
was a
4,000 was a city invoice, so it sounds like it was, the question mark is, was it actually certified in 2012 and then reopened in 2014 because another invoice came through, and then does that just move the certification forward just based on that or any other invoices that are coming in? Because we're still working from within our reallocation that goes back on this TID for closing it out now.
I was speaking generally, I have not been directly involved in this recertification. But I think based on the discussion today, I know what question I have now. And so if that was a reimbursable expense under the original TIF, I guess, which I'm confused of what I'm hearing. So to take a look at that, certainly I could see where that would be justification if that was a reimbursable and the city didn't have the bill yet and then submitted a bill potentially. But although I do understand there's other costs besides that included in it, but I could see that being a basis to take a look at the certification or why the council would want to do that. I would want to look at it more between now and the meeting on Monday night in order to get a better answer. I would also point out that the city engineer is not here, and I think he had some, or now our public works director potentially, and that he had some concerns maybe about the cost, whether the costs were reasonable or not, and had some opinions on that. So perhaps the best thing to do would be to, now that we've fleshed out some of the issues, continue it to Monday night, and we can continue the discussion on Monday night.
Would it be in our best interest to actually continue this to the next Legal and Finance so that we've got all of these answers, or at least most of them?
I mean, that would be my preference. I'm
Ew.
suspecting the Estises might have a different.
So since I've already spoken, I can't make the motion, but I will yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make that motion to continue this to the May 3rd, to the next Legal and Finance meeting so that we can get some better information. Because if I had to vote on it today, it's going to be a no.
Mr. Wright, you have the floor.
I want to speak to the item directed to the motion is the design fees were built into the TIF, right? For the booster station?
With the First Amendment in
Yes, the
2008.
first one, okay. And then the city went to go to design build, which would, again, change the fees, correct? They should. So that's, I want the answer to that, but thank you. I agree with it, postponement. Thank you.
Mr. Shaffey, you put in a speaker request form, and I can't honor that, but what I can do is if the committee will give me a little leeway, I will ask you a question. Go ahead. So I am just very curious of why you put in a speaker request form.
I did that there because there was a lot of confusion and maybe miscommunication among all the parties, and I just, since we were involved in the project, it is my job to protect the city and to protect Mr. Astis and just say what is really factual. And if you wish to hear it, I would be more than happy to share it with you.
Absolutely, I would love to hear it.
It is
I
okay
don't know
with
if the
the
committee
members
would
of the
like to, but I would. Go ahead.
Okay, a few of the facts on this project. Number one, the project plan was put in 2005. I believe the project was bid in 2010, and the amendment was made, as was previously mentioned, to move from drilling a well to a booster station. Typically, and in that amendment, the professional fees were separated from the rest of the project plan or identified as a component within the project plan as 10% of the anticipated construction cost. And for mechanical projects such as booster stations, wells, and what have you, typically those costs are in the range of close to 20% between actually just design and construction administration because of the complexity of the nature of such projects. And if there are studies included in those projects to really come up with the final design, the fees may go higher, and typically those studies are done separately. In this case, the studies, the design and construction administration were included in the professional fees and were not actually estimated or calculated accurately, or they just took a 10% of the construction cost and assumed that is the professional fees. The booster station for itself, the professional fees were estimated or were allocated $60,000. And just to give you an idea, the construction administration, which is part of the professional fees, the city hired that out, and it was approximately $85,000 by itself. And those are actual accrued costs, just to give you an idea. And also, between 2005 till 2010 or 11, when the project was finished, you all know that there is inflation. And in this case, not only the inflation, there were actually 3 road alignments for the sewer line, for the water line, and the road that is consistent along that water main. There were 3 different widths analyzed. There was, in each alignment, there were major drainage components that needed to be analyzed to make sure that the hillside is stable. So therefore, the professional fees, which consistently the city included construction administration, which is the bill that Mr. Astis has received from the city, the $84,000. Typically, that is included in the professional fees, which gives you an idea of the magnitude of the cost of this project. Has the city allowed financing to be allocated to capital improvement costs in the past? Yes, it has. Yeah, I agree with Joel, that the timing, it's like we really need to tighten it up because we cannot leave it forever. Unfortunately, at that time, nobody anticipated that things are going to take this long for somebody to certify. And like Mr. and Mrs. and Ms. Johnson have not mentioned why is the delay, and actually they may not even realize why the delay, but I do. In 2008, the economy crashed, as you all know, or 2009. They already have a contract with the city to build the booster station, and it was in the process of being built. As a matter of fact, there was a tank that is being designed and final designed to be put up on top of the hill. So therefore, that project has to go forward, but the economy is still stalled. Actually, Mr. Astis, we were, the reason that it got certified without even our, I really don't recall getting involved in that certification. And the reason I was not, Mr. Astis and, and his staff tried to do the certification on their own because we were not involved as engineers for Mr. Astis during that period of time. And so therefore, there may have been thinking that, my gosh, all of our costs are in and what have you. They may not even have looked at the invoice that is going to be coming from the city and all the invoices that they have incurred through the process, because they want to get the interest rate paid, and instead of feeding the TIF, they wanted to certify it so they don't have to pay the bank that interest rate every day. And those are the facts. So you cannot go and pay $1 million of interest on $1 million out of your pocket when there are taxes that are being incurred to pay for that interest. And incidentally, that interest that they pay out of their pocket, they will recover from the TIF. Meanwhile, that payment that would have come from the taxes, it reduces the interest and reduces the principal, therefore reducing the total cost of the project. So the early certification, it has a lot of pluses, but it has to be complete. In this case, it was not. I don't know if you have any further questions, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chaffee. Mr. Wright, you have the floor.
One question for you, Mr. Shafi. You brought a question to my mind is that during this process, the developer is paying, I would assume, a construction loan with interest until it's permanently financed by the TIF. Is that correct?
That's typically what happens.
So that's the interest when you're up against a project of not in a troublesome economy and high expense and so forth, and they're fronting money for an infrastructure for the city of Rapid City and so forth and so forth. That makes it very real.
Yes.
So that's why that until it's certified, it's like when you build a house or buy a house or build a house in particular, you're paying a construction loan until it's done, occupied, and financed, correct?
Yes, yes. And in this case, it's until it's
There are issues that all
certified.
need to be discussed by the 31st. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no one else in the queue. We have a motion on the floor and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Item number 10, update on Mount Rushmore Road reconstruction vision funds. Mr. Wright, you have the floor.
I just want to acknowledge the memo that we received from Dale Tech, our acting Public Works Director, and what a good job the Public Works is doing now in accounting for the expenses towards this project, and gives us a sense of completion and assurance that we're not over budget, that kind of stuff. And I'm looking forward to a briefing on Monday night. Thank you.
We have a motion to acknowledge on the floor and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Now we're on to non-consent items, items 11 through 14. We have no speaker request forms, so I will open up public comment and close it, and we will go to item 11 from the Finance Department, introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6181 regarding supplemental appropriation number 2 for 2017. We have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Community Planning and Development, introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6112, an ordinance to amend provisions concerning zoning applications by the city by amending section 17.54.040 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. And Alderwoman Scott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And may I ask Joel Ledeen a question, please?
Yes.
Thanks. Joel, if you could just give a brief summary, because I'm not looking for a full explanation, but a little bit more than just what the title, because the title says that we're changing this based on when the city needs to rezone something. Excuse me. So if you could just give just a little bit more information on that. Or, yeah, if Carla wants to do it, that's perfect.
Glad I saw her back there. She actually drafted the changes and been working with planning on it, so I will defer to her.
And Carla, we had an update, or, you know, we've had an update as for city council members, but if you can just give a brief synopsis just so the public understands the purpose behind this.
Okay. The ordinance would clarify and simplify some of the processes that are required when the city rezones property. And this generally happens in the case of annexations. And it also can happen when we have a new zoning district. And so this has really come up because the downtown plan said that we need a new zoning district to address changing conditions downtown. And also because staff have completed the notice provisions related to the Big Sky annexation and rezone. So it's kind of been brought to the fore that the current ordinance requires two-step notices with 30 days in advance or 30 days in between to provide a detailed list of detailed information about what sort of uses are there, what sort of uses would be allowed. those kind of individualized disclosures to the property owners. This process would, the ordinance change would kind of simplify that without, in order to make it a better expression of what the changes are going to be and how they'll affect it. I think it's fair to say that people, in the context of Big Sky and the downtown plan, are aware of the rezone that's going forward. This isn't a matter of the city trying to rezone somebody's property behind their back, but really it's part of a large-scale conversation between the property owners and the city, of which the rezone is really just a part of it. So the plan with the change is to clarify the procedures for notice, still provide all the notice that the property owners will want and need, and just in light of the fact that there is, it's part of a larger conversation between the staff and the city council and the property owners that are affected.
So primarily, and what I got from the update that I had is, the reason we're doing this is, as the two projects you mentioned, when it comes to a large section, whether it's an annexation or a redistricting or rezoning of a district, there's a lot of, as everyone knows, there's a lot of hoops to go through, and when you have that much property at one time, it can really slow down the entire thing, even if everybody in the district or everybody in the annexation is already aware of it and they're for it. But this will actually hopefully stream that process. And as you said, there's no intention for the city to do something without proper notification. The notification will still be there. Anybody affected will still get notified, but this kind of streamlines the process so that we're not just kind of dragging things out.
Right. Rezones, as you know, are already lengthy processes. It requires an ordinance amendment, so it requires 2 readings before you all. It requires a reading before the Planning Commission before that. There's notice in the paper. There's notices that will go out to all of the affected property owners and neighbors as well. So there's a lot of different levels of notice and opportunity to be heard about a matter on a rezone. And now I've kind of lost the track of what you had said.
Just trying to streamline it.
It
when
is
it's
this
large
one,
tracts.
This one piece of it. We're not trying to get out of our obligations with regard to anything else, just trying to make this part simpler. The plan, it's hard to say, but the rezone area east of 5th might include up to 140 property or 120 properties. So that's a significant amount of notice, disclosure, time that could be spent. And honestly, if I got a notice in my mailbox that my property was being rezoned, the first thing I would do would be call the city. And I think any sort of notice we will provide would probably engender that kind of follow-up contact. So, yeah.
Thanks, Carla. I just know, since this is coming Monday night, the clarification, I think, will help the public understand that we're not trying to change drastic things. The notifications still be in place. We're just trying to streamline it to make the process, when the city has a large project that they're rezoning, that hopefully it makes it a little bit quicker. Mm-hmm. So, thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Modrick, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move to approve and retain the floor.
Second.
Thank you. So I'd just like to make a statement and thank you for the work that you've done, because this aligns with the comprehensive plan, the downtown master plan, the 5th Street to School of Mines plan that we've all as a council approved. And one of the things that had been addressed through those master plan processes with public opinion as well as business opinion as well was to streamline or catch up the way we're doing our zoning, and that we really needed to address the zoning. And Carla, your work is really going to help that process. So I think it's great that you're bringing this forward to us to give us reduced stepping stones so that we can get more done in our big projects, like you said, that can include 140 properties or more or less. So I appreciate that, and I definitely support this so that we can move forward with our master plans that we've already previously approved.
Thank you. And we have a motion on the floor. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. From the City Attorney's Office, item 13, second reading and recommendation of ordinance number 6178, an ordinance to update campaign finance disclosure requirements by amending Chapter 2.32 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. We have a motion and we have a second to approve. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Item 14, second reading and recommendation of ordinance number 6179, an ordinance to update references to the Convention and Visitors Bureau related to Business Improvement District Number 1 by amending Chapter 3.24 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. Have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Move to adjourn. Have a motion to adjourn and a second. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.